when a humble village widow stepped into the courtroom to reclaim her stolen land. No one imagined she'd outsmart seasoned lawyers and leave, even the judge in awe. The court was already full that morning. The smell of old paper, sweat, and hot tea filled the air as people waited for their turn. Lawyers in black coats walked in and out, their shoes clicking loudly on the stone floor. Clerks shouted out names. Documents shuffled, and the sound of fans turning slowly above echoed in the background. In the middle of all this, a woman slowly walked in, carrying an old brown file clutched to her chest. Her sari was simple, light blue cotton, a little faded from many washes. Her hair was tied in a plain bun, and her slippers made a soft sound. As she walked carefully to the front bench, no one noticed her at first. She looked like just another poor woman with another hopeless case. Her name was Nirmala Verma. She was in her late 40s. From a small village on the outskirts of Delhi, life had never been easy for her. After her husband died in a sudden accident 5 years ago, everything had started falling apart. The small piece of land her family owned, their only security, had been taken away by her husband's distant relatives using forged papers and dirty tricks. She had knocked on many doors, Panchayat, Tehsildar, even some local lawyers. Most didn't care. Some asked for money she didn't have. Few told her to forget the land and move on. But she couldn't. That land had memories, roots, and it was her children's future. So, she decided to fight, even if it meant standing alone. She waited silently as other cases were heard. People argued, shouted, begged, cried. She watched everything carefully. Then, the court clerk called out her case number. She stood up slowly, walked forward, and stood at the wooden podium. The judge looked up from his file, confused. "Who is representing the petitioner?" he asked. "I am, sir," Nirmala said softly, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady. "You mean you are appearing in person? Without a lawyer?" He raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that. "Yes, sir," she replied. The judge leaned back in his chair, glanced around the courtroom, and smirked. Some people in the audience chuckled. One junior lawyer whispered something to his friend, and they both laughed under their breath. The judge didn't hide his irritation. "Adam, this is not a village panchayat. This is a district court. Cannot just walk in and argue a case like you're reading a school essay." Nirmala didn't respond immediately. She simply opened her file and looked at the judge. "Sir, I understand that. I've studied the law involved in my case. I have all the documents here. If you allow me just 5 minutes to speak, I will explain." Judge rolled his eyes. 5 minutes, then, and be quick." The clerk called for silence. The courtroom became a little quieter, though a few people still smirked. Waiting for this village woman to make a fool of herself, Nirmala took a deep breath. Her heart was beating fast, but her face showed no fear. She opened the first page of her file. "My name is Nirmala Verma. My husband Ramesh Verma died in 2020. We owned a plot of land in village Haripur. Survey No. 268. After his death, my husband's cousins Ratan and Sergi used fake documents to claim the land. They filed a transfer with the help of the local Patori. I went to the Tehsil office and found irregularities in the mutation register. I have attached copies of the forged papers and the original sale deed in this file." She handed the judge a neatly stapled bundle of papers. He took it, somewhat surprised by the order and clarity. Nirmala continued. "I filed a complaint at the SDM office, but no action was taken. I studied the Indian Evidence Act, Section 65B, and gathered proof that the scanned signature on the fake document does not match my husband's known signature. I got it compared by a handwriting expert. His report is in an excerpt." See, the room was now fully silent. The judge flipped through the papers, reading quickly. His expression changed from bored to focused. The chuckles from the audience had stopped. Even the lawyers in the back were now paying attention. "I also wish to bring to your notice that as per the Hindu Succession Act, I am the first legal heir. No transfer of property can take place without my written consent. My signature is not on any transfer document. This makes the mutation process illegal under law. Her tone was respectful but clear. She wasn't pleading. She was arguing like someone who knew what she was talking about. The judge looked up again, studying her more closely this time. "How do you know about these laws?" he asked. "I read. I go to the district library twice a week. I borrow legal books. I also watch legal awareness videos on my son's mobile phone," she said simply. The judge leaned forward, tapping his pen on the desk. "And you've never studied law?" "No, sir. I studied till 10th class, but I've been studying this case every day for the past 3 years." For a moment, there was silence. Then the judge looked at the opposing lawyer and asked him to respond. Man, clearly unprepared for what he had just heard, fumbled with his file. "My lord, the mutation was done as per procedure. The records show." "Do you have a written consent from the widow, as per the Hindu Succession Act?" The judge interrupted. No, but do you have any certified original of the sale deed, proving their claim?" "Not at the moment, my lord." "Then please sit down." The lawyer sat, red-faced. The judge turned to Nirmala again. "You may continue. I'll hear your argument fully." From the back benches, a man whispered, "She's not just any woman. She knows her stuff." Woman next to him nodded, impressed. Another junior lawyer quietly took out his notebook and began writing. Nirmala continued calmly. She explained how the forged papers had different ink colors, how the stamp used was outdated, how the land revenue records didn't match the claimed area. She also pointed out that Rattan and Surgeet had bribed the local Patori, whose name had appeared in a corruption case before. She had found this through a newspaper report and had attached the article printout in her file. The judge now looked genuinely interested. "Do you have a timeline of events?" "Yes, sir. It's on the last page, with dates, applications, replies, and copies of my registered letters to government offices." She handed over the page. It was written in neat handwriting, every point clear and labeled. The judge read silently for a minute, then put the file down. "Madam, your preparation is impressive." "Thank you, sir. This matter requires serious attention. I will need to verify some documents, but your arguments are valid." With that, the judge adjourned the hearing and gave the next date. As Nirmala turned to leave, people looked at her differently. Some smiled, others moved aside to let her pass. One man whispered, "Salute to this woman." A young female lawyer walked up to her outside the courtroom. "Auntie, are you really not a lawyer?" "Oh, Beta, you should be." "I've never seen anyone argue like that. Not even half the men in that room." Nirmala smiled softly, tucking her file back into her cloth bag. "I'm just fighting for what is rightfully mine." As she walked out of the court gate, the sun was bright. The world outside was still noisy, chaotic, and unfair, but something had changed. Nirmala was no longer invisible. She had stood before a judge, faced humiliation, and turned it into respect. Not by shouting, not by crying, but with calm, quiet, confidence, and knowledge. No one had expected a village woman in a cotton sari to shake a courtroom, but she had, not with power, with truth, and her journey had just begun. The sun was still rising over the court building when Nirmala reached the gate. She had come early, as usual, carrying her cloth bag filled with documents.
Right.
Her sari was neatly ironed, her hair tied in a simple bun, and her calm expression was the same as always. But this time, something felt different. As she entered the premises, some people nodded at her respectfully. The clerk, who had once ignored her, now greeted her with a small smile. Even the security guard, who never used to look up, opened the gate and said, "Namaste, madam." It was the day the court would hear her witnesses. This was an important part of the case. Nirmala had spent days preparing the witnesses, helping them recall dates and events, making sure they understood how to speak clearly and truthfully. She had even made notes for each of them and reminded them not to be afraid of the courtroom. The courtroom was again full. Some law students had come back, eager to watch the next part of the case. 2 reporters were present again, this time carrying cameras and small notepads. The senior lawyer, representing Rattan and Surgeet, came in with a proud look, followed by his 2 clients who looked more nervous than usual. When the case was called, Nirmala stood up and walked to the front confidently. The judge looked at her with a neutral expression, but with more attention than before. He asked if the witnesses were present. Nirmala replied, "Yes, sir. They are outside. May I call the first one?" The judge nodded, and Nirmala signaled to the peon. The first witness, an old postman named Bhogat Singh, entered. He wore a worn-out brown coat and walked slowly with the help of a stick, but his voice was steady. The judge asked, "Do you know this woman?"
Yes, sir.
"I've known Nirmala ji for 20 years. I used to deliver letters to her house. Her husband Ramesh ji was a good man. After his death, she stayed alone on the same land. Do you know anything about the land dispute?" "Yes, sir. One day I went to deliver a pension letter. House was locked. The next day I saw new people there and Surrogate. I asked them where Nirmala ji was, and they said she had left. But I knew that was not true. She would never leave that land." The opposing lawyer stood up. "Did you actually see them breaking the lock?" "Oh, but I saw the broken lock on the ground. And I know Nirmala ji didn't give them permission to stay." The judge made notes. Then the second witness, Meera, a vegetable seller from Nirmala's lane, entered. She wore a simple salwar suit and looked nervous at first, but relaxed after. Nirmala gave her a small smile. "Did you see anything related to this matter?" the judge asked. "Yes, sir. I saw them entering the house at night with two men I didn't know." Next morning, Nirmala Didi was crying. She told me they had taken over the house, told her to go to the police. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" "I was scared, sir. Ratan and Surrogate have local muscle. But Nirmala Didi is brave. She told me not to be afraid, so I'm here." "Why, the witnesses spoke. The judge listened carefully. Opposing lawyer tried to confuse them, asking tricky questions, but the witnesses stayed firm. Nirmala had prepared them well. She didn't object or interrupt. She stood silently, trusting their words to speak for themselves. When the last witness finished, the judge looked at the senior lawyer. "Do you have any rebuttal witnesses?" The lawyer shook his head. "No, my lord, but I would like to cross-question." The petitioner, Nirmala, agreed calmly. She stood straight and answered every question the lawyer asked. He tried to make her angry. He tried to confuse her with legal jargon, but she responded with clarity and calmness. "You claim your husband's cousins forged documents? How do you know?" "Because I compared their documents with the original sale deed. The dates, stamps, and even signatures are mismatched. Studied Section 465 of the IPC about forgery. I also used Section 17 of the Indian Evidence Act. Claim to be a legal expert now? I don't claim anything. Only studied because no one else would fight for me." People in the courtroom nodded slightly. Even the judge looked impressed. The lawyer finally gave up. "No further questions, my lord." The judge then looked at Nirmala. "Do you have any final argument to present?" "Yes, sir." She opened the last section of her file and said, "All I want is justice. I don't want to punish anyone. I just want my land back, the land my husband and I bought with our hard-earned money. I want to return to my home, that's all." The judge leaned back and said the matter will now be taken up for final review. Orders will be reserved. The hearing ended, but the atmosphere remained charged. People didn't rush out like usual. They looked at Nirmala with admiration. Few even clapped softly as she walked out of the courtroom. Outside, reporters approached her. "Madam, how do you feel after today's hearing?" "I feel grateful," she replied simply. "Not everyone gets to speak their truth. I was lucky that I got the chance." "What will you do if you win the case?" "I'll return to my home and help other women who are facing similar problems. I want to show them that it's possible." From the corner, a junior lawyer came running. "Madam, my senior wants to meet you. He says you argue better than most of us." Nirmala laughed a little. "I'm just a woman trying to save her home." That evening, as she returned to her rented room, she felt hopeful. She cooked a simple meal of rice and dal, thinking of her two children who were staying with relatives. Her son had sent a message. "Ma, I'm proud of you." She smiled and replied, "I'm doing this for you, Beta." She then sat down with her books again. Even though the main hearing was over, she wanted to stay prepared. She had learned that the law could be a powerful thing, but only if used correctly. She had come too far to make even one mistake now. Meanwhile, in the judge's chamber, the judge sat quietly. Reread the entire file from beginning to end. Everything was in place: documents, witnesses, timelines, but more than the legal details, he was touched by the strength and honesty of Nirmala's journey. He thought about how he had laughed at her on the first day, how he had expected her to fail, and now she had taught him something he hadn't learned in years. The law was not just for the educated or the rich, it was for everyone. The judge picked up his pen and began writing. It would take time for the final order to be typed, but in his heart, he had already made the decision. In the days that followed, people continued to talk about Nirmala's case. It became a topic of discussion in nearby courts, in law colleges, and even in local newspapers. One newspaper printed a headline, "Sara-clad legal warrior stuns court." When Nirmala saw the paper, she shook her head and smiled. "I'm not a warrior," she said to herself. "I'm just a woman who didn't give up." More and more women came to her for help. She didn't charge anyone. She just listened, explained what little she knew, and encouraged them to fight if they had the truth on their side. Some lawyers even invited her to legal aid camps to speak. One of them asked, "Why don't you study law formally? You'd make a brilliant advocate," Nirmala replied. "Maybe one day, but right now, I want to finish what I started." And she waited for the judgment, for justice, and for her home. She had done everything she could. Now, it was in the hands of the law. The day the judgment was going to be announced arrived like a silent storm. It had been nearly 8 months since Nirmala had filed the case. Every day during those months had been a mix of hard work, quiet courage, and unshaken belief in justice. She had done everything possible. She had read laws by herself, guided witnesses, studied documents, stood alone in courtrooms, and spoken the truth with respect and strength. Now all she could do was wait. Nirmala got ready early in the morning. She wore the same soft cotton sari that she wore for every hearing. It was neatly washed and pressed. She carried her well-organized file in her cloth bag. Her steps were steady, but her heart was racing. She didn't show it on her face. Her eyes were focused, her mouth calm. No matter what the outcome, she knew she had fought with honesty and dignity. The courtroom was full, more than usual. Everyone seemed to know that today was Judgment Day. Some people who had never met her had come to witness what they had only read in the newspaper or heard through word of mouth. Law students from different colleges had taken seats in the back rows. Even some senior advocates who usually didn't attend lower court sessions were sitting silently, watching. The judge entered, and the courtroom stood up. Nirmala stood too, her hands folded quietly in front of her. The judge looked over the file, and then adjusted his glasses. His expression was serious, but not harsh. There was a deep silence in the room, as if everyone was holding their breath. The judge began to speak slowly and clearly. In the matter of Nirmala, Verma versus Ratan and Surjit Verma, regarding unlawful possession and fraudulent mutation of land. Title. He paused and looked around. His eyes stopped on Nirmala for a brief second. She didn't blink. She just listened. This court finds that the original land documents presented by the petitioner are legally valid, and that the mutation carried out in favor of the respondents was done without due process, without the petitioner's knowledge or consent, and, in clear violation of land records procedure. There was a small murmur in the room, but the judge raised his hand and continued. Furthermore, the possession of the said land by the respondents is declared unlawful as they entered the property. Without legal ownership, and in the absence of the petitioner, who was the rightful occupant at the time, the judge took a deep breath, then announced clearly, "This court hereby cancels the illegal mutation. The land shall be returned to the petitioner, Mrs. Nirmala Verma, within 15 working days. The local administration is instructed to ensure peaceful handover of possession and provide any necessary support. The respondents are ordered to vacate the premises immediately. The police will assist in executing this order if required." There was silence at first. Pure silence. Then someone clapped. Then a few more. The judge banged his gavel lightly and said, "Court is adjourned." Nirmala remained standing, frozen for a moment. Her ears had heard the words. Her brain had understood them. But her heart was still catching up. She slowly sat down on the bench. Her fingers gripped the edge of her file. Her eyes blinked, and only then did the first tear roll down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of pain. It was a tear of peace. People began surrounding her. Strangers shook her hand. A young girl hugged her. The newspaper reporters rushed toward her with notepads and microphones. Television reporter had already turned on his camera. "Madam, how are you feeling? What does this victory mean to you?" Nirmala wiped her tears gently and said softly, "It means I can go home." The crowd outside the courtroom had grown. Her well-wishers, her witnesses, a few lawyers who had quietly admired her from afar were smiling. Ratan and Surgit, her husband's cousins, left the courtroom quietly, their heads down. They had avoided looking at Nirmala completely. Their lawyer followed behind, clearly disappointed. One of the judge's staff members came too. Nirmala and said with a smile, "Madame, sir wants to see you in his chamber." She was surprised but nodded and followed him. Inside the judge's chamber, the judge was standing near the window, looking outside. He turned around when she entered. "Nirmala, gee, please sit." She sat down with respect and folded her hands. "Wanted to speak to you, not as a judge, but as a person," said. She didn't know what to say, so she just listened. "When I first saw you in this courtroom, I judged you unfairly. I thought you were just another unprepared petitioner. But what I witnessed over the months was something rare. Your knowledge, your patience, your clarity, and most of all your respect for the court and the law. It reminded me of why I became a judge in the first place." Nirmala looked at him with quiet eyes. "Sir, I only did what I had to." He smiled. "No, you did much more than that. You made people believe again that justice is possible, that the law is for everyone. I hope you continue guiding others. Our system needs people like you." She nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. To such words, as she left his chamber, she walked down the corridor slowly. The same corridor where months ago people had laughed at her. People moved aside to let her pass. Some even folded their hands in respect. That evening, Nirmala returned to her rented room one last time. She opened her old steel trunk and pulled out the keys to her home, the home she had not seen in so many months. She held them in her hand for a long time. Then she started packing. The next morning, she traveled to her village. The local media had already spread the news. A few women from nearby villages came to see her. They waited outside the tehsil office when she reached to collect the official land papers. The officer, who had once ignored her, now stood up from his seat and greeted her with folded hands. He gave her the papers without any delay. When she reached the land, the house looked smaller than she remembered. The front door was damaged. The windows were dusty. The walls had cracks. But it was still her home. She stood outside the gate and looked at it for a long time, then she walked inside and opened the door. It creaked, as if recognizing her footsteps. The house welcomed her like an old friend. She sat on the floor, in the same corner where her husband used to read the newspaper. She closed her eyes and let the silence fill the room. In the following days, she cleaned the house, repaired the broken door, and repainted the walls with help from neighbors. People came to congratulate her. Some brought sweets, others just came to shake her hand. But Nirmala didn't stop there. She began hosting small legal awareness meetings in her courtyard. Women from nearby areas started visiting her every weekend. She explained how to read land papers, what to do when facing domestic violence, how to file complaints, and whom to contact. People began calling her Legal DAD, a small NGO that worked for women's rights, visited her one day. They asked if she'd like to work with them as a local legal advisor. She agreed on one condition, that they wouldn't charge the poor. They happily accepted. One afternoon, she sat writing in her notebook under the neem tree in her courtyard. A girl of about 12 approached her. "Didi, I want to study law when I grow up." Nirmala looked up and smiled. "And you must read every day and never be afraid of questions." The girl nodded seriously and sat down beside her. That day, Nirmala realized that her journey had changed not only her life, but it had lit a lamp for many others. The woman who had once stood shaking in court, humiliated for her simplicity, had now become a quiet symbol of strength. She hadn't won just a land dispute. She had restored belief in herself, in justice, and in the system. She often thought of her husband and imagined what he would say. She believed he would be proud, and deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. After the long battle in court, Nirmala's life slowly began to change. She had won the land dispute and returned to her home, but that was not the end of her story. It was a new beginning, one filled with hope, responsibility, and a desire to help others. A simple woman who had once been mocked and underestimated was now a symbol of courage for many. Returning home had been emotional. The house, though old and worn, was filled with memories. She would often sit quietly and think about how far she had come from being a scared widow to a strong woman standing up against injustice. But she knew that her fight was not just for herself, or many others, especially women who faced problems similar to hers. She wanted to use her knowledge and experience to make a difference. Nirmala started visiting nearby villages regularly. She carried with her a small bag filled with papers, books, and simple pamphlets that explained basic rights and legal procedures in easy language. She would sit with groups of women under trees or in community halls, patiently explaining how to protect themselves from land disputes, domestic violence, and unfair treatment. Her voice was gentle but firm, and her stories inspired others to believe that they too could fight for their rights. At first, many women were hesitant. They had lived their lives believing that the law was only for rich people or lawyers, that courts were too complicated, and that speaking up would bring trouble. But Nirmala's presence changed that. She showed them that courage and knowledge could break barriers. She taught them how to document evidence, whom to approach for help, and how to remain calm in difficult situations. Local NGOs began to notice her work. One day, a representative from a women's rights organization came to meet her. They wanted her to join their legal aid team and help provide free advice to poor women who couldn't afford lawyers. Nirmala agreed happily but insisted on one condition: the help must reach even the smallest villages where no one dared to speak up, with the support of the NGO. She began organizing workshops. Slowly but surely, word spread about the legal deity, the woman who had stood fearlessly before a judge and won. Women traveled long distances to seek her advice. Some brought cases of property theft, some sought help against harassment, and others wanted to learn how to protect their families. Nirmala's life became busier than ever. She managed her home, helped her children with their studies, spent long evenings preparing for the next day's meetings. Despite the hard work, she never complained. Her smile remained warm, and her faith in justice grew stronger every day. One important lesson she learned was the power of education. She started encouraging girls in her village to go to school. She would visit schools and talk to teachers about why it was important to teach children about their rights. If you know your rights, she told the children, you will never be afraid to speak the truth. Her efforts soon reached the attention of government officials. One day, a local magistrate invited her to participate in a districtly legal awareness program. Nirmala was nervous but accepted. Standing in front of a large crowd of government officers, lawyers, and villagers, she shared her story. She spoke not just about laws, but about courage, hope, and the importance of never giving up. Her words touched many hearts. Officials promised to strengthen support for legal aid in rural areas. Some lawyers volunteered to join her efforts. Even the judge who had once doubted her sent a letter of appreciation. Life was not always easy. There were challenges and setbacks. Some powerful people tried to discourage her. There were threats, but she did not let fear control her. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to keep moving forward despite it. Nirmala also faced moments of deep sadness. She missed her late husband and worried about her children living away. But whenever she felt weak, she remembered why she started this journey. She remembered the smile of the widow who finally got her land back. She remembered the tears of a young girl who wanted to study law because Nirmala had shown her it was possible. With time, Nirmala began writing a simple guidebook in her village language. It was a book that explained legal terms, rights, and procedures in a way anyone could understand. She hoped it would help women who could not attend workshops. The book was passed from hand to hand and became a treasured resource. Her children grew proud of their mother. They saw how many lives she was touching. Her son, who had once been skeptical, decided to study law too. He wanted to follow in her footsteps and help those in need. Her daughter started a small school for girls in the village. Together, the family worked to create a better future. One day, a young woman came to Nirmala's home with tears in her eyes. She told her story of being cheated out of her property by her own relatives. Nirmala listened carefully and promised to help. They went to the court, gathered evidence, and fought the case with honesty and determination. The young woman won. She hugged Nirmala and said, "You saved my life." Stories like these filled Nirmala's days with purpose. She realized that her victory in court was only the beginning of a larger battle for justice and equality. Every case she helped was a victory for many others who watched silently but believed in her. Strength Nirmala's journey became an inspiration for many women across the state. Local newspapers and television channels featured her story. She was invited to speak at colleges and women's conferences, but she always remained humble, saying, "I am not a lawyer. I am just a woman who learned to stand up." Her work created a ripple effect. Other women began to study law and join legal aid efforts. Village committees formed to help protect rights. Slowly, change was happening from the ground up. Despite all this, Nirmala never forgot the first judge who doubted her. She knew that many in the system still underestimated women like her. But she also knew that her courage and knowledge had opened a door for others to enter and fight their own battles. In quiet moments, Nirmala would sit outside her home. Watching the children play, she felt a deep satisfaction. Her journey from a simple widow to a respected legal guide had not only changed her life, but had begun to change a whole community. Her story was proof that strength, knowledge, and perseverance could defeat even the toughest challenges. No matter where you come from, you can write your own story. Let me know if you want me to help with anything else.